Hello, and welcome back to the main stage here at FTT Digital Builder. And we are about to kick off the section of our agenda, which is looking at growth and building companies with profitability and purpose. And to start off our section, we have a very special fireside chat with Playo founder and CEO, Jeppy Ringdom. Hello, Jeppy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for inviting me.
Very good. I'm very pro waving on Zoom calls. My husband thinks I'm nuts, but I always wave. So yes, in this age of we need more human contact, I think waving is very, very good. So why don't we
That's
start off?
right.
Yeah, why don't we start off with our chat? And I always, this is the question I ask all companies, all founders and CEOs. Um, you know, we're talking about building companies, looking at purpose, looking at sustainability, looking at growth. What type of company is Playo? What problem are you solving?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So Playo is providing a spending solution for forward-thinking businesses. We allow companies to involve their staff in buying stuff for work. So allowing them to get a payment card with certain rights and rules, but then we are helping the employees to do what they need to do, collect their receipts, categorize, file their reports, and the finance team to automate all of their processes. So this is a lot about cards, and soon you will also be able to pay bills with the Playo product. We're very excited about that. We service companies in most of Europe. UK is our biggest market, and basically any company from the smallest single proprietor to couple of thousand employees are happy users of Playo.
Excellent, excellent. Now we know what Playo is. We can move on with the rest of our conversation. I mean, one of the things I really like to get into is busting myths about the startup world. I mean, you've had a career in various industries and in this industry for a while. You're not this sort of mythical 20-year-old university dropout when you started Playo. I want to really know when you sort of. I don't think there's very few of those people that exist. What motivated you to found the company?
I think a couple of things. I think, I've had a corporate career. I've been in consulting and I joined a technology company at a certain point in time. So for me, I think it was, key part of the motivation was just to build a company. I wanted, alive as an entrepreneur. I wanted the liberty of, selecting the team and, founding a culture in a business and all of those good things you get as a founder. So, just founding a company was a big motivation for me. Secondly, I had strong opinions about the problem space that we decided to found a business in. I grew up in a family of accountants, and in my childhood, I was faced with these problems of transactions that were missing receipts and stuff like that. I worked in my dad's accounting practice, so I had some strong opinions about the pain points, and Nico, my co-founder, and I, we thought, we came up with some nice solutions to it. So I think the problem space also became important for us eventually. So those two things were our great motivators.
Excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about language. This is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. Sometimes I get frustrated that I think that the language used about the experience of being a startup founder is very different from the day-to-day reality of what entrepreneurs go through. So I want to hear it from you. What words would you use to describe being a startup founder?
Yeah, I think for me it is very exciting. I think it's by far in my career, and I've tried, I said consulting, corporate, all that kind of stuff. I'm a lot more passionate about being a founder. There's a lot at stake. You have very passionate people around you. There are high expectations, stuff like that. So I would say, exciting is and sort of vibrant is one thing for me. Secondly, I also think it's meaningful in the sense that you're building something, you're making a difference, and in our case, we also care a lot about the team and having an engaging workplace. So I think there's a lot of meaning in what we're doing as well. I would also not shy away from the fact that a founding position can be sometimes a little bit lonely. There are just responsibilities you sit with as a founder, and you say on one side you have a board, but the board is typically also your investors, and you need to be, you could say, you need to be shining against your board as well as also being open and transparent. And then you obviously have your team, and in many ways, they are strong partners as well. But there's just certain things that is responsibility of the founder, and that can sometimes be a little bit lonely. And I think it's good to network with other founders to be able to sort of cover that loneliness a bit.
Excellent. So my next question again is, I'm looking for the sort of the definitions from you. I mean, there's a lot of opinions out there about what is acceptable levels of growth for a startup. So how do you define growth for a company like yours?
I mean, I guess there are different ways you can define growth, but when you mention growth, for us, it's about it's about the top line growth, and under that would be user growth and growth in activity and all sorts of leading indicators. But in our case, we are a venture backed company, and it is how much can the company grow on the top line at our stage. That is the key focus. I guess that's different if you're not venture backed. You can have bootstrap companies that would have other, I would say, acceptable levels of growth. But as a venture backed company, ideally we need to deliver more than 100% growth year on year at our sort of Series B, Series C stage. So we put a lot of attention on that, and constantly try to find ways to unlock more growth.
So I want to move on to another topic that gets discussed a lot, especially recently, and that is sort of building a sustainable business, or a business that has sort of a minimal negative impact on the environment and our society. How is this done? Is it possible to hit all those touch points with, as you mentioned, growing as a venture-backed company?
Well, I think for us, it's been something that has come with maturity. I would say in the beginning, to be completely honest, we had to have most of our attention on the business and solving the problems for the customers, and being extremely customer centric, as well as building our organization and our culture. But I would say that we've hit a stage where a lot of these things you're mentioning, like being a sustainable company, is something we need to take a more explicit stance on. I would say it's always been a part of our values, and in general, we've been excited about stuff like removing paper from processes, and we've been excited about building a remote culture so that we can engage as a company without having to travel, and all of those kind of things. But we've never been super explicit about it, and I think we've reached the maturity where we need to be more explicit about what kind of position we want to take as a company, internally and externally. Another matter from a sustainability point of view that we've cared a lot about is leadership and engagement around employees. And we believe that that's a massive social problem, that 80% of the workforce is out there, and that goes for the UK as well as for Denmark. 80% of the workforce is disengaged in their work, which means that they're just generally unhappy with spending 70-80% of their time in the workspace. And that is something we care a lot about, not only internally, but also trying to make a difference with our product and the way we service our customers, in creating a little bit more engagement in the workplace. So there are things like that we do care a lot about, and we on that latter part, we're quite explicit about it, and it's a part of our vision as well.
Yeah, no, we further on in our discussion, we'll talk a little bit about work-life balance, but I had a bit of an extra follow-up question to something that you said. You talked about, I was listening to the radio this morning, and they mentioned that only about sort of 10 to 15% of the population take about 80% of the flights normally. This is obviously pre-pandemic days. Looking at having a more remote workforce, a workforce that doesn't travel too much, was this something that you looked at before the global pandemic, or is this something that's sort of come into more to the forefront because of what we're going through right at the moment?
Yeah, it's been almost right from the inception of Playo that we've been a remote oriented company, and I can really take no credit of that because this came more from some of our first employees and my co-founder, that they were really excited about partnering with engineers in other areas of the world, and I was like, okay, let's try it. I don't know how that's going to work out. And well, what it meant was that we set up completely as a company to embrace that, being digital first, having cameras in the office, never taking company-wide meetings before 2 p.m. because of time zone differences, always communicating, in a digital way and video and stuff like that. And that was just a tremendous success for us. Because we could then hire all around the world. B, I think it brought a lot of diversity to the company that was a key part of building our culture, but also a key part of having a product that just works for any kind of company. That said, we also found that for us, it probably wouldn't have worked to be 100% remote. We think we need to blend it with sometimes meeting up in person and building those personal relationships. So that has been a key part of our formula, that at least a few times a year we would gather the teams and spend a lot of social time as well. And if you sort of blend in that formula a bit, we actually never saw a difference between people working remotely or in the headquarters or some of our other offices. It was completely the same feeling and the same experience of being a colleague or team member, no matter from where you worked.
Interesting. No, I think it's an interesting discussion we're having right now, I think globally. But I wanted to move on. I wanted to talk about investors. This is another topic that causes a lot of discussion around founders in the startup community. What were some of the strategies you used to evaluate who would be the best investors to help support growth for Playo?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in a fortunate position every time we've been raising, that we've had a multiple of investors to choose between, and we've always sort of based our choice on the gut feel and the relationship. To be completely honest, we've most of the time neglected the brand and the reputation as such. Of course, reputation, we've done a lot of research and the reference calls and stuff like that, but sort of the external verification of the fund has not meant a lot to us. It's more the relationship with the people that would join our board, how they would understand our business, how we connected with them on a more human level. And then, of course, reference calls and stuff like that. Terms is, of course, important as well, but I would say as long as we were in the 5 to 10%, neighborhood of alternative offers, we went with the relationship and the connection.
I'm glad you mentioned that word relationship, because I wanted to maybe ask a follow-up question to that. I've sometimes hear from startup founders that sometimes they get involved with investors that push them in directions that they might not think is best for their company, maybe too fast growth or growth into different regions they don't feel the company is ready for. Has that ever happened with your company? And if so, how did you deal with that?
No, it has never happened. But we've also been quite, deliberate around how we would want to work with the board, and our board has been tremendously valuable on certain aspects of running a business, like connecting us with new investors, or using their network when we are recruiting, or involving them in debt conversation or whatever, that are their competencies. But we've rarely involved them in decision-making processes around where to take the business. We've seen that as our job as leaders and founders of the company. So on that perspective, we've only provided updates more so than involving them in the actual decision making. So no would be the answer to your question. What I would say though is that the nature of bringing in a venture investor, you need to be prepared to some level of ambition and some level of risk taking and hunting for growth. Because if you're not prepared to take those steps, it becomes a difficult relationship. So I would say every time we've taken on board new capital, you got to be prepared to raise the bar and chase for that, 5-10x every single time you raise. So that's kind of like, that's just the playing rules, if you're in venture capital, and if you're not prepared for that, you should do something different.
Interesting. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to founding teams now. I mean, you mentioned earlier that sometimes being a CEO is lonely, which I've heard from other people, and of course, you also have a co-founder as well with Playo. But how did you go about gathering your founding team at the company?
Yeah, so we are only two co-founders of Playo. We go back a few years before founding Playo. We were colleagues in a company called TradeShift, and it was important for us that we knew each other, and we've complemented each other quite well, because Nico is technical. He's an engineer. He was CTO of Playo, and I came from the business side. So I would say from that perspective, we've complemented each other quite well. We waited a bit before we started the company, and I wanted to start a company a little bit earlier. I was probably playing around for a year or a year and a half, but that was because I needed a co-founder I was comfortable with, and I didn't want to team up with just any co-founder that I didn't know. So for me, I had to invest a little bit of patience before getting started.
I know a lot of people describe the co-founder relationship as like a marriage. So you want to marry the right person.
That is true. That is true. I mean, and then you get to a stage, where you can hire brilliant people as well, and we've passed that stage a long time ago. And we today it's not so much about co-founders anymore. It's about the leadership team of Playo, and it's about all of the other brilliant people we have around, right? So we of course play a more marginal role today than we did in the first year or two of the company.
Yeah, no, I'm great. You're really leading me into my next question, which is hiring, which is often cited as one of the most difficult parts of being a CEO. What type of people thrive at Playo?
Yeah, and I think that also changes over time, right? I think in the beginning we were just very deliberate around, we wanted to hire entrepreneurs, company builders, people who were generally passionate about the journey, and as such, not really looking for a job per se. If we felt like the candidate was looking for a job, if we could kind of like sense that from the conversations, we would never hire them. We would only hire people that wanted more than a job. It was important for us that there was a human connection, as well as when we selected our investors. And I think that the difference that all of these things made was that, we had a team of 15, 20 people that were just, really on a mission together. And, we were quite diverse actually as a team, but because, we were so passionate about this, and we wanted to make a difference in the world, it seemed like we could absorb an enormous amount of diversity in the team. Today, we are hitting almost 300 people, and some of the values are still the same, and we also hire on the same values, but I would say they come to life in a different way. In the early days, the value of entrepreneurship would mean firefighting around the business and constantly stepping out of your comfort zone, constantly stepping out of your area of expertise. Today, luckily, you don't need to step out too much of your area of expertise, but entrepreneurship is still there. It means, trying to be more creative in what you're doing and experimenting, sharing with the team and stuff like that. So I would say in general, our values and our values of hiring has remained the same, but they come into play a little bit in different ways today when we are 300 people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm gonna ask you that my next question. I often like to nose about on company websites and look in the blog section. So I want to know what are team camps and how are they run?
Yeah, I mean, team camps are to a wide extent, you could say that the spice that we needed for being a remote first company, that we needed to bring people together. And we've done that in the beginning. We did it company-wide 4 times a year. Before pandemic, we did it 2 times a year, but then the teams would go on camps as well. But team camps are a lot about alignment and sharing the direction of the company. It is a lot of team updates, but it's indeed also just forming relationships in between us. There's a lot of activities. There's a lot of fun going on in the evenings. There's a lot of parties for those who like to party. And just there's a ton of memories that are created on these team camps. We generally go to locations where we are launching a new market. So when we launched Germany, we had a fantastic team camp in Berlin. And when we launched Ireland, we had a fantastic team camp there. This year, we are going to Spain in the fall. Fingers crossed that will happen. And this is because we launched Spain last year. So that's the principle.
Excellent. So I'm going to talk a little bit about. I'll tell a personal story. I used to work for a Danish company, and a few years ago, my assistant went to Copenhagen a few days before me to work on a project we were working on, and she called me up in London to say, everyone stops and goes to lunch during the day, and it's 5:00, and everyone's left the office, and it's only 3:00 in the afternoon, and she wanted to know what she should do. And I said to her, when in Rome, you should do what people do. So I do understand sometimes, the Scandinavian style of work-life balance can sometimes be very different compared to other parts of the world. Which I think, how do you? You mentioned you expanding into Spain. How do you export that type of culture to other countries that might not experience that type of work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, when you say export that culture, there's the question of how do we export it to the rest of our offices, but there's kind of also the question, can we export some of that to our customers? But let's take the first one. I would say for some stuff, I guess we try to export it, and then for other stuff we don't. I think, as you say, it's a very Danish thing to have lunch in the office.
It's great.
It just makes so much sense in our view, because like all other countries, you need to go to the street and you need to queue up, and you don't speak with your colleagues and stuff like that. We think it makes a ton of sense just to have lunch in the office, and instead of spending an hour, you spend 20 minutes, and then you share your lunch with some colleagues and you get to talk and connect and stuff like that. So I think that's just super meaningful to us, and we do that in all of our offices. However, you could say when it comes to when does the workday stop? It's not something we have a policy about, or that it has to be in one way. I would say probably in the headquarters, people would go home maybe a little bit earlier than in some of our other offices. It's not something we're very deliberate around, to be completely honest. I would say more the way we lead the company, which is very, I would say, bottom up, or like a flat hierarchy kind of way, where we just generally involve people a lot and give away a lot of responsibility, require people to be fairly autonomous, is something we definitely want to see across our offices, and something we assess the leaders we hire on this kind of approach. But it's also something that to some extent we've built into our product, that our product is about enabling your workforce, and it is a a trust first kind of product, that you would allow your employees to buy stuff for work. And then, there are certain levels of safety and control behind that, but we are a very enabling product. And we are mostly for companies who believe in that, your workforce should be enabled, they should be set up for success, their processes should be automatic. If you have a very control-oriented way of leading your people where you're like, they need to pay out of pocket and then they need to come for reimbursement and I would want the right to reject that and all those kind of approaches, then probably we're not a product for you. So it's also something we care a lot about from a product and product vision perspective. And we love when our customers come back to us and say, hey, Playo is just so beloved with our employees and it's a proof point of the culture we want to be. And, it's changed our approach to believing in the workforce and stuff like that. And we actually get that kind of feedback. And it's that is probably what makes us the most proud. Not so much saving the time, that's great as well. But when we can make a difference in the workforce and create a little bit more engagement, that is really what drives us.
I like that a lot, having your internal work culture bleed into the product as well. That's interesting. You meant, you've taken us kind of through this whole journey of Playo when it first started. You're now a much bigger company with 300 staff employees now. How does culture evolve from that, the two founders, small team to a multinational company with hundreds of employees? How does culture evolve?
Yeah, for us, I would say in the beginning, we didn't talk too much about culture. We didn't think too much about culture. The only thing we did was just, hire people that we thought were brilliant and passionate, and we connected with them on a human level. And then, we were just heads down on solving a problem for our customers. And then you reach a certain stage where, your product works and all of that, and you start to ask yourself questions. And if you don't, some of your colleagues would do it. Which is stuff like, so why are we doing what we're doing? And, what are we as a company and stuff like that. And I would say for us, that sort of hit when we were like 30 people or so. Then we started to figure out, okay, why is this a great company? Why are people so passionate? How can we replicate this? How can we turn this into a formula? So, that was the first stage. And then, we started to write down some values, and we wrote down a purpose and a vision for our product, and those things went hand in hand. But as we talked about before, some of these values just came into play a little bit differently in the early days. We have a value around transparency in the company. And one of the reasons we like transparency is that as said, we hire entrepreneurs, we hire people that are excited about building a company. And we want them to have the feeling that they are building a company, and they should be able to engage with other teams and know what's going on over here and know what's going on for the company as a whole. So we give back, that feeling of being a company builder. But in the beginning, people were capable of engaging everywhere and following activity all around the company. But today, when you're 300 people, there's just too much to keep up with. We still make stuff available so they can go and they can see, and we have Notion pages and roadmaps. But it's just very difficult for people to know everything that goes around the company. So now you need to be a little bit more deliberately on how you share stuff, that you don't disturb people too much, and you do it in very efficient formats. And it's up to people themselves, do they want to engage a little bit with the sales team as well as in product, or what do they want to do? So I think, most companies would be able to hang on to their values as they grow, but would probably need to take a stance a few times on, how do we make these values to come into play today versus previously. We've had to do that a couple of times.
Interesting. Okay, so all of your answers sort of perfectly lead me to my next question. So, I want to know what the company was founded 2015. It's now 2021. What has been some of your biggest lessons that you've had to learn over the past 6 years?
I would say that the biggest lesson for us has been, once you overcome that first wave of finding your product market fit and not only product market fit, but also like product market distribution fit, and also ensuring that you address a very large market. When you come over that first phase and you have a little bit of revenue, you have some successful customers and stuff like that, then everything that sits between that micro success and massive success is people. And so then it becomes a people game from there. How do you attract the best people? How do you set them up for success? How do you make people engage ongoingly? How do you structure your organization so that everyone pulls in the same direction? How do you communicate? How do you measure? How do you make people accountable? All of those kind of things is really the formula after the first wave. And I just never thought about that before building a business, but it's just so obvious when you're in it that, as a founder or even as a leadership team, you at the end of the day, you play such a marginal role in the direct success of the business. It all becomes indirect, right?
Mm. Okay, cool. So we're getting to the end of our chat, our discussion. So I'm gonna give you a big question. What are you most proud of?
I would say two things. One is seeing the success of our teams and our great player warriors in the company. Those that just have grown so tremendously in the past few years and just have been so excited and made such a difference for the company. Those human stories internally, I think, makes me really proud. And simultaneously, externally, when we get feedback from our customers that we are making a real difference for their organizations, particularly on the cultural side, and living some sort of leadership values that we like in Playo.
Excellent. Jeppe, thank you so much for sitting down for our Fireside Growth chat. I greatly appreciate it. Everyone, please stay on the main stage at FTT Digital Builder, and we will be continuing our discussions around growth, profitability, purpose, sustainability, all those good things. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks for inviting me.